Well, thank you very much for that presentation. I'm having a little trouble understanding from what you've presented how we are going to know when we look at the outcomes that you're going to measure and tell us how they've changed. How are we going to know what of that change is a result of the two components, the special project grants as opposed to the celebration communities? And then how are we going to know how these two have contributed relative to the contribution of all the other promotional work that's been done for the Olympics?
I think in part the different strategies that we're using will help clarify with that we'll be doing case studies with the celebration communities. But I think perhaps, Catherine, you gave a lot of thought to the research design and methodologies. Would you like to pick up on this?
Yeah, there's two main components right. There's the celebration communities and the special project grants. And I'm just trying to understand more. How are we going to know what the effects of each of those are independently?
Maybe I'll just answer to your question, is that we're proposing to use different methodologies to address different components. Primarily, as just Sharon mentioned, when we're going to be looking at celebration communities, that's where the community case studies will come along. That's why we will select specifically those municipalities and cities where the celebrations took place. With help of our consultative group and your as partners, and that's one part. But for special project, we will be using slightly different methodology, as we've highlighted as part of those grants that were given out to different organizations. They were required to report back on the results achieved. As part of the grants, that was a reporting requirement where they had to outline what exactly was achieved, identify some of the outcomes, and we will be doing a compilation of those results, as well as obviously as a project funder, Canadian Heritage, as well as other ministries involved and partners. They have a funding. We assume that they have a funding database where they record all of the transactions related to these grants. So it's going to be different methods that we will be using to make sure that we capture unique contributions of these two components.
Thank you.
As well, I believe our expert advisory committee could also speak to the outcomes of the both components.
But one issue that you've just raised is that obviously as the games went on, everybody knows that television was providing a very extensive coverage of the Olympic Games. So it is one of the challenges. It's the attribution of what happened as a result of actually being in the community, and that's why we're suggesting case studies to actually go and talk to the community, as opposed to more of an anonymous type or less personal online survey where. For people, it will be hard to actually recollect. Was it a result of having that celebration there, or it's just a general euphoria? Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. As an evaluation manager, I'd just like to get a couple of points of clarification on some of the methodological points that were raised. So there'll be focus groups in each of the 100 communities with a torch relay?
No. Do you want to? Sure. What we're proposing, because we thought about it, and we know that the number of communities is really, really large, I believe 189. What we've suggested so far, because one of the issues that came up in our discussion was the difference between the impact in rural communities versus urban communities, as well as the potentially regional differences, as the impact, let's say, in British Columbia may be different than the Atlantic provinces. So what we're suggesting to do a stratified sample where we look at the 10 major provinces, and we select two communities from each of the provinces, one rural and one urban. But when we look at northern territories, because again, it's more remote communities, where our initial thinking on that is that we will select one community, one remote community from each of the northern territories. So in total, it's going to be about 22 communities.
Okay,
I think, one of the things that we're very mindful of, while there wasn't any budget provided, we're trying to be mindful of the fact that there are going to be budget constraints.
Right, I like to hear that, the stratified sample. I think that's
And one more thing, again, our thinking is that when we will identify some of the common themes that emerge in those case studies, we want to do them regionally to see if there is any similarity in the communities within regions, as well as to look at them, other similarities, other common theme emerging in rural communities, and maybe an impact is actually greater in those communities as opposed to urban communities. So when we actually going to then analyze the data, I think there are various ways that we can slice and dice and look for common themes.
That's great. One more quick follow-up question. So there's going to be interviews and an online survey. Did you have a chance to give any thought to ensuring that the voices of Aboriginal, visible minority, and linguistic minority folks are represented in each of those?
In the advisory committee, they are represented. But during the interviews? Yes, go ahead.
A key reason for involving Aboriginal and some of the minority communities having that representation on our advisory committee is so that we can be looking for their input to determine how best to engage some of the communities within the provinces and also the Northern Territories. I think one of the key things is you just don't go into, I think, many Aboriginal communities saying, oh, well, now we're here to do this. There's got to be something in it definitely for those communities, and we can't determine in advance. So the advisory committee, there's more details certainly to be worked out, and we can only do that by sitting down with those people as part of the committee that's guiding the whole evaluation.
And with regards to official languages, our firm, we do have the bilingual capacity, and we were thinking about making sure that all the data collection tools, as well as the validation of those tools, is actually happening in both official languages. And one of the effective ways to do that is to use multiple translations, where you develop a tool in English, then you translate it into French, and then you translate it back to make sure that what you arrive at the end is actually what you have started with. And it's important to validate, again, both versions to make sure that you are collecting the same information. So that was my point, actually.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you again for a presentation. As a senior manager at the Heritage, you must understand that I'm quite concerned about the success of the initiative. We invested lots of money in it. And perhaps you've already answered the question, but I'd like just you to confirm how you're going to ensure that the success of the initiative that the results of the evaluations are well received in the communities. How the results of the evaluation will be, how do you ensure that the results of your study or of your evaluation will be well received by the communities or the stakeholders?
Well, if I understand the question correctly, we intend to have a very strong relationship with our stakeholders, and by developing this relationship through contact, when we go into the communities, we intend not to just fly in and fly out or zip in and zip out. We intend to develop a relationship with our stakeholders, develop a relationship with the people that we'll be having focus groups and interviews with, and then and assure them that they will have a chance to look at our results before we actually analyze them. So, for example, we will record, as was mentioned, we will record not to make transcriptions, but for us to go back to make sure that the data quality is there, and then we will also share our summaries with the people that gave us the information to make sure that we haven't missed anything, that we've in fact taken down their thoughts and their concerns. So we intend to include our stakeholders so that nothing will be a huge surprise for them. It will be their evaluation. It'll be their words that we're looking at.
Okay, and perhaps just one last question. Without prejudging of the results of the evaluation, I'd like to understand how you will. Sorry, suddenly I have a blank here. What was my question?
It's okay. You won't lose points.
Okay, well, I'll drop it there. Sorry.
No?
I think they've been grilled enough.
Okay.
I think even though, just to that last point, this evaluation, is definitely beyond what some people might consider as participatory evaluation, but it doesn't mean that we cannot incorporate elements from it as we can.
Sorry, just to be fair to this group, because I did ask the question to the other
Okay.
groups, I'd just like to know how you, my God, why do I forget my question when I'm going to ask it? Okay, we have to fund this initiative. We have to make decisions whether we're going to fund that type of initiative in the future and how much money we'll allocate to that type of initiative. So what type of information would you be able to provide us to reach a decision?
Can you repeat the question?
Now or before the evaluation's done?
No, without prejudging of the results of the evaluation, what type of information will you feed senior management in order to make a decision on resource allocation?
I think it's only fair that we ask senior management to wait until we finish the evaluation so that we can put together a cohesive list of recommendations to make sure that if there are any changes that need to be made, those changes are brought to their attention so that they have a clear picture of what worked, whether the program was, whether the process was strong, whether that needs to be improved upon, whether the intended outcomes happened. Does anybody else want to add to that?
Well, I think it goes back to the three major areas of evaluation questions that we've identified, that we're not, again, looking at one particular area. We want to provide to you information about the outcomes, so what is being done, and then we want to look back at how it's being implemented, because one thing, if there's no, so we don't see some of the outcomes, but entirely another perspective is that the processes that are being implemented, they're not up to par, so, and the relevance, and I think that's why we've selected those three areas, to make sure that you will have all the necessary information to be able then to make strategic decisions.
Okay, thank you.